I am really excited to get into the picks because this year, like we alluded to, there's a lot of things that are going to play out that we have no idea. So going back and looking back on this is probably going to be kind of fun because who knows where it will be. But I think how do you want to get going on this?
Well, I think we'll start with our locks. I think that's, and when we say locks, it's like, well, who really knows how this season is going to go? But when you got 16 spots available, I think we can safely assume that at least I feel like my 4, they're going to find a way in, whether it's pointing their way in or a win and you're in. So my 4, I'll start with my first one. I know we're going to be a little bit the same on these, but I got the defending champ, Kyle Larson. Looked fast even on a short track, which is not really his specialty. Still had speed. I don't see any reason why he can't pick up at least a couple wins this year. I definitely have Larson as a lock for the playoffs.
Yeah, I have Larson as well. He's somebody that I think we're going to get consistent speed out of. He's going to be able to put the car where he needs to, communicate what he needs to his crew chief, and just be on a successful team. I think he's a lock for me. The second driver, I think, was right there with him last year. I really am going to want to watch early on in the season how Gibbs is able to do, because I got Denny Hamlin as a lock, and I think he is somebody that, he's going to put it out there. We know that. He's going to make some decisions that we're going to question from time to time, but he knows how to win races. I think he's going to lock himself in early. I just don't know when. It could be right out of the gate at Daytona. He's great there, obviously. So I really like Denny Hamlin.
Obviously, I got Denny Hamlin as well. Just something to note, he didn't win his first race until the playoffs last year, and he still, despite Kyle Larson winning almost every race, he still was in contention late in the year to win the regular season championship. Still made the Final Four for I don't know how many years in a row. I know at least 2. I think it's a little bit more than that, but if you take away the championships, because this isn't, the championship isn't decided on season-long performance. It is, you get the playoffs and all this other stuff. If you just look at the last 2 years, and that's not completely fair because Larson obviously was out most of 2020, I don't think there's actually been a better driver than Denny Hamlin, because he was up there as one of the best, if not the best, the year before, with him and Kevin Harvick were winning every week. He wasn't winning, but man, he was getting top 5s left and right last year until the playoffs when he actually started getting some wins. So I don't see really any reason why, unless Denny just has a ton of mechanical issues throughout the year, I don't see any way that he does not make the playoffs.
The third driver, I think we all agree on, is Chase Elliott. He's driving for Team Hendrick. He's been the champion as of late. Recently, he's young. I think he's primed and ready to go this season. He looks really confident in his abilities this year already. I think he's ready to go. It seemed like he was pretty enthused about the season from the little bit of time they chatted with him at the Clash and just seeing some stuff throughout the offseason. I think he's kind of getting dialed in and is excited for things with this new car, and we'll see how it leads.
I got Chase as well. I mean, there's so many road courses on this schedule again this year. He's got a little bit more competition than he has in the last few years, but you got to think he's going to get it done at least one of those places, so that'll lock him in the playoffs. But one thing I do want to see from him is a win on a non-road course. I think that's what really hurt that team throughout the year, is they couldn't quite get it done on the ovals, whether it was bigger or shorter. A lot of it has to do with their teammate just being so strong. I get that. He had times. He could have won the Coke 600, was really good, but hey, Larson was better. So we do agree on those. Now, where we finally have our first difference in our locks is this last 2 driver in our 4 here. I got Martin Truex as a lock. I know you got someone different, but to be fair, we both still have these guys making the playoffs. But my 4th lock is Martin Truex, and you're going to go with who?
I'm going with Ryan Blaney. I think Ryan Blaney was somebody last year that made a big step, and I think that with Brad Keselowski leaving, he steps up into a situation where he's right behind Joey Logano in the pecking order with Austin Cindric coming in as a rookie. I think he's going to get a little bit more attention that he potentially needed, and a little bit more funding potentially to. He was on the cusp last year, really was there, and I think this year he might push the envelope to get into the Final Four and nudge Truex out. And Truex didn't have the greatest of clash, but again, it's early. I'm not going to contribute that much to that, and I didn't have him in this scenario before. I picked this way before the clash, and I think that's something that we're going to find out as the season goes, how dialed in Ryan Blaney is this year.
I expect Blaney to have a pretty long, successful career in NASCAR, but I really think that we're on the cusp of he's got to take that next step. Came in similar time frame as Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott already got a championship. Blaney's been competitive. Has never looked quite as good. Obviously, they're in different equipment, but hey, Logano won a championship not that long ago in the same equipment. So I think we need to see a little bit more from Blaney this year. He needs to take that. He doesn't have to, in my opinion, make the championship four, but he's got to be right on the cusp. If he ends up getting out because of a wreck at Martinsville or something like that, so be it. But he needs to be a little bit more dominant throughout the year. And I do think that he will in this new car. So I completely understand why you went with him as a lock. But as it comes to our next four drivers, kind of calling this our almost locks. And like I said, I did put these together before the clash. But I have as my first driver, Kyle Busch.
Yeah, Kyle Busch, he's going to be somebody that's going to take advantage of the situation this year. I think he's going to put his nose out there. We talked about how aggressive he is earlier in the episode. I think he just gets the job done this year. And it's just, is he going to be competitive enough to get down to the Final Four? We'll find out. It's going to be fun to watch.
Also, something to consider. I don't know if this is extra motivation or maybe actually works against them, but unless something crazy happens, this is the last year of the Candyman. M&M's, Mars, they've already said that this is their last year, so we're not going to see the yellow M&M's car anymore. We're not going to see the Snickers or Skittles or anything like that. So that's a big hit for that 18 team. They know they're secure through this year. I'm sure they've already got some other deals in place for the years after. None of that's really come out and been announced yet, at least as far as I'm aware of. But you got to think that's going to be some extra motivation because he's going to be working a little bit more to get those sponsors throughout the year. So I think that helps them, but it's certainly not something that they probably were looking forward to having to do.
Yeah, it was a disappointment letting the little one know that the M&M's car is no longer going to be after this year. So he's going to have an impact. I think he's going to have a little bit more motivation to get the job done.
Next driver I got is Joey Logano, the Clash winner. He's a great driver. He goes overlooked a lot, and I think it's just because early on in his career he ruffled a lot of fans' feathers, and they don't really always want to give him the credit that he deserves. But he is definitely one of the top drivers in the field, and if these cars are pretty equally competitive, I think he's going to get plenty of wins. So I don't have him quite as a lock, but man, it's right up there with him. So I definitely got Logano making the playoffs.
Yeah, me and you agree on him as well. I think he's somebody that we both feel is going to be really in a good situation this year, especially with the new car. We already saw him be successful in multiple events over the last few seasons in new settings. Lends kind of to his upper hand, I think. The next two drivers, though, are
already talked about, but
yep,
different kind of scenarios.
So Martin Truex Jr. barely didn't make the cut for me because into that first initial four because I think he's kind of in a weird spot. He's on the way out, and he was talking about potentially not being there for this season. And so I know he's excited about this, but if he's already kind of hitting the retirement, is he already kind of there? I don't think so, but that might just be enough for me to put him in the 8, not the 4.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if this was your thought process. This wasn't quite my thought process. My locks, I'm not saying those are my championship 4. I just think that they will be locks to make the playoffs. Maybe you have a little bit different viewpoint, because I still think Truex could make it, but I don't know if at this point I would put him in my championship 4, but I would put him in the playoffs because, again, a lot of road courses. We know he's good on short tracks, and hey, it's Martin Truex. I didn't expect much out of him last year, and I think he rattled off 4 wins. Another thing we didn't talk about, quick side note, one cool thing that we don't have to worry about this year, other than super speedways in Atlanta, there's not different horsepower packages. They're running, I think it's 670 horsepower everywhere. So that could change up how the strategy is of these teams, because you won't have Joe Gibbs focusing on 750 horsepower packages and then Hendrick kind of doing the same, but putting maybe more focus in on 550 tracks compared to Joe Gibbs. So we don't have to worry about that dynamic. Teams don't have to worry about that dynamic. So that, I think that it's going to have a bigger impact than what maybe a lot of people are going to expect right away. Because that's how Truex made championship 4 last year. They were just so good on those high horsepower tracks. So something to consider. I got Blaney as one of my guys. We already talked about him. I am looking for him to make a step forward this year. I think he could make that championship 4, but he's definitely an almost lock. Now, where I say we're kind of different is our last of these almost lock guys. Both Hendrick guys, both young Hendrick guys, but we differ. I'm going with Alex Bowman in the 48, but you are going with
William Byron. I think he made a big step forward last year. We saw him be consistent across multiple track types, was fast in a lot of settings. That just shows you the ability and the skill set that he does have, and why he was signed at such an early age to take over for a nice Hendrick ride. And he was kind of an odd one out, and now I think he's really made his presence known. I think this year he's going to be somebody to contend with.
Completely agree with all that. The one thing I would say is he didn't win 4 races like Alex Bowman did, and no one really expected that. No one expects that this year. I think he gets a couple surprise wins again. He's a talent. That's a great car, great team. Greg Ives is solid crew chief. I think Alex Bowman, he's going to have another pretty strong year, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's still kind of inconsistent like last year. So I think there will be some frustrations if you're playing Alex Bowman at certain races where you think he's going to do good and then he finishes 16th or something. So, but I think he makes the playoffs. These are guys, these next 4 guys we're going to talk about, they are guys that should make it. They have all the equipment there. They got the talent. They got the speed as far as we can tell. But things can always get a little funky. But I know our first couple guys are the same. I've got Kevin Harvick and Christopher Bell as sort of my front 2, making it as the should make it.
Yeah, I've got those 2 guys as well. I think they, obviously Kevin Harvick's a veteran that will be able to communicate what he needs to in the number 1 car at the Stewart-Haas stable. I think that's pretty much should make it, in my opinion. We saw that they didn't have the wins that were accustomed to them having last year, but with this new car, we'll see how it stacks up. And then Christopher Bell is somebody I get excited about watching every week. I think he's a really good talent, and he brings a lot to the table. We saw him with a road course win early last year, which surprised a lot of people, and I think he's just a real well-rounded driver that brings a lot to the table.
I agree with that. I will say, though, if he gets in a little bit of a slump, that could be tough, because I agree he's got the talent, but he's still young. Does he have sort of that, wouldn't be a sophomore, but kind of almost a sophomore slump? Because that first year, he wasn't with Joe Gibbs. He's with another Toyota team, a little bit lesser of a team. Did well there, all things considered, but had a great year last year with Joe Gibbs. I think he has another one, but again, to me, it's a little iffy. The next 2 guys we just got done talking about, I got William Byron. You have Alex Bowman. Kind of already went there, but we do differ on our 4th driver. Again, I made this before the clash. Now I'm a little bit worried. We just talked about it, but I do still have Kurt Busch making the playoffs. I think he will do enough with that team. Whether he gets a win to get in or points his way in, I think he still makes it. He might get bounced out of the first round. I don't know, but I just find it hard to believe that Kurt Busch doesn't find a way to get in.
I am a little bit more optimistic in the should make it category for Austin Dillon. I think that he was somebody a few years ago I would have been crazy to put him there, but I think his development as a race car driver has
He missed it last year.
He did, but I think him and Reddick were right there. They were battling each other, and it's just one of those situations where I feel he's developed more and in the right settings that I didn't think he would be as in some of the situations he is in some of these events, and really has shined. And instead of shooting himself in the foot like he did early on in his career by being too aggressive, he's learned to settle down and take what he gets. And I like that a lot about Austin Dillon. I think he's progressed where I think he should make it.
Yeah, that's tough for me to say for sure. I actually don't have him in my playoffs, but I wouldn't be surprised, especially seeing the speed that we got from RCR as a whole at the Clash. But again, how much can we really take from it? Definitely don't hate that pick, but personally didn't end up there as well. And then as we get into our last four, we're kind of calling this our wild card. I'm taking a little bit what I was kind of considering some, I don't want to say Hail Marys, because I think these guys are better than a Hail Mary call, but maybe some drivers you wouldn't necessarily expect. Now, this guy, obviously, the first guy I'm going to talk about was in the playoffs last year. We just talked about him, Tyler Reddick. I think he'll have the speed. I think he's going to get a win this year. He's been close, whether it's on a road course or mile and a half. I think he finds a way to get it done at some point this year. I think he'll be in the playoffs. I know you're landed there too. You just talked about him. I was surprised that you went with the next guy that I have, but Austin Cindric. I got him in his rookie year making the playoffs. I know I'm picking him because there's like 12, 15, 30 road course races this year, whatever it is. He's really good on those. What was your reasoning for putting Austin Cindric in your wild card playoffs?
Austin Cindric has been the staple of toughness, dedication, and everything that you can think of at the lower levels of NASCAR. I think he's landed that Penske ride for a reason. He's a good race car driver and very consistent. I really see a lot in him and his development, and to be able to jump right into the number 2 car that has a lot of history and be able to take that on, I think he's going to win early. I really think he's going to be somebody to watch, especially with some of the parity that we're going to be seeing throughout the season. I think he takes full advantage of that.
And we saw him in a couple races last year be strong.
In the Cup Series.
Cup Series, yeah, absolutely. He was strong at COTA. We saw him up front. Just didn't really have the car. I think he had a problem. I don't remember what happened, but I know he had an issue, and he just didn't have the handling on the car later in the race. But early he looked good. He was looking really good at Road America, and then I think it was a transmission issue went out on him. So he ended up not finishing that race, if I remember correctly. But he was up front leading and looking strong. And again, that's with very few starts at that point. He's going to have a full season to try to get into the playoffs. So I think Austin Cindric is, again, he's a wild card, but I don't know how much of a wild card he is because you said it. He's in that 2 car. It's a strong car. And for a lot of the same things I just said about Cindric, I'm going to kind of copy and paste to my next driver, and that's Chase Briscoe. I think he did look fairly strong at the Clash. He was doing some things different than some of the other drivers. He was the only one shifting during qualifying and practices and stuff like that. May have been what toasted the transaxle, I think is what they said happened, but that won't be an every race issue. I think Chase Briscoe is going to find a way to get a win on one of these road courses, or at least do enough to get into the playoffs. But if he doesn't get a win, it's going to be tough because last year was a tough year for that 14 team.
Yeah, I think he's a good candidate for the wild card. I didn't go with him. I went with somebody you already have in the should make it category with Kurt Busch. A veteran, I think, like I've talked about earlier in the episode, somebody that's going to be there to contend with. But my 4th pick, we differ with our 4th pick here. The final spot I gave away was Brad Keselowski. I think because of all the points I made earlier about the veterans and how they potentially will bring along the entire team, I think he is able to get into the playoffs somehow.
Okay. So even if they give you the option to change this based on what you saw at the Clash, you would still stick with Brad?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. My last pick is Justin Haley. I think he's going to be competitive at a lot of races. We've already seen Kaulig be competitive last year at races, look good, obviously, at the Clash. I know a lot of people may be familiar now with the name Justin Haley because he was in like 34 or 35 races last year. But he's with Spire. And that was like their secondary car. You know, their main guy was Corey LaJoie, who had better finishes, but not by much compared to Haley. So Haley was always sort of that punt play. Sometimes he'd work out. But man, now that he's in a car capable of winning, or at least capable of being up front, this dude knows how to win super speedway races. Seen him do it in the Xfinity Series. Yeah, he won the rain, lightning Daytona race a couple years ago, and he didn't even lead technically a lap in that race.
That's
what
Daytona.
I mean.
That's Daytona.
But aside from that, that's not why I'm kind of putting him in there. Is because of how I've seen him run, even in that Spire car at these super speedways. He knows how to get it done there. He's also a heck of a road course driver. I just think that even if it's not through a win, I think they have the capability of pointing their way in, and he's their 1A driver. Their secondary car is going to have like 3 different drivers throughout the year, which is going to be awesome. We're going to see Noah Gragson in that car. Daniel Hendrick will be back in the Cup Series. And then obviously the Dinger will be doing most, if not all, of the road courses. So that's also going to be fun to kind of see. That may actually really screw some of these guys trying to get in, because those are guys that can take wins away.
They go trophy hunting over there at Kaulig.
Exactly.
And they will put the driver that best suits the situation in that 16 car, and they'll poach some trophies, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays. I don't know how many wins they get, but doing 1 or 2 wins even is going to shake things up.
And they also, I don't know how well it'll work in the Cup Series, but I remember last year, I think it was Talladega. I think it was a Talladega race in the Xfinity Series. Coming to the checkered flag, they were 1, 2, and 3. Haley was in 3rd. I think Jeb Burton was in 1st, and then Dinger was 2nd. And they were all in line. They were working together. They weren't letting anyone by him. And then right after that last corner, Haley makes a move. He gets up high, got the speed, got to the front. I think Jeb ended up finishing 4th, but it was like 1, 2, 4 finish for Kaulig Racing because they worked as a unit. Obviously, they'll only have 2 versus 3 cars in the field this year for Cup Series. But, man, if they have that same approach, especially when Allmendinger is in the race, because he's already familiar with working with Justin Haley, unless they just have some really bad luck, I think Kaulig could be a force this year. Not a Hendrick Motorsports kind of force, but I think that they are going to make their presence felt.
Yeah, they'll shake things up for sure. I think that's where we will finally see it all play together or come together. But that was 16 drivers we talked about, and that's going to be fun to see, look back on and see how it all played out and how wrong we were or how right we were on a couple of these. It potentially we'll find out. But
I'm hoping I at least get 12-ish right. I think if I can get 11 or 12, I'd be pretty happy.
That's batting a pretty good average.
Because there's some good drivers that I didn't put in there, like a Brad Keselowski. I know his talent, so that could bite me a little bit. But if I could finish with about 11 or 12 correct, I think I'd be pretty happy with these picks.
Absolutely.